Hello, my name is Janetta, and today the purpose of this video is to present you the results of the IRI that I administered on one of the children and the plan that I came up with to improve her reading skills. IRI was administered on a girl by the name Elizabeth, who is in the second grade, and she is a student in a local public school, and she has some reading challenges. During the administration of the IRI, it was easy to see that Elizabeth is a very well-adjusted, well-behaved child. However, she has some reading challenges. One of the challenges that she experiences is reading consonant digraphs, such as GH, LK, CH, and TH combinations. Her second issue seems to be the comprehension skills, and specifically inference skills when she's reading the text. So today's lesson plan that I'm presenting was designed to improve or help her overcome both of these difficulties, one of which is, as I said, reading consonant digraphs, and second one to improve her inference skills. Both of these skills are also required by the Common Core curriculum, where in the reading standards RL 2.1 and RI2, it states that it's important for students in the second grade to ask and answer such questions as who, what, where, when, why, and how to demonstrate understanding of key details in the text. I think this task would be impossible to accomplish if the students' comprehension skills are poor and inference skills are absent or poor as well. Another Common Core standard, ELA Literacy RF23, is to identify words with inconsistent but common spelling sound correspondences. So it's really important that the children in the second grade know how to read and how to pronounce various consonant digraphs. Therefore, the title of my lesson is Decoding of Consonant Digraphs and Making Inferences. And the focus of this lesson is just that, to improve Elizabeth's pronouncement of various consonant digraphs through various activities and strategies, as well as to improve her inferencing skills. Because Elizabeth is one of the 23 students, I will focus. All kids in the class will benefit from this lesson, but I would like to differentiate my instruction and focus on those students who have similar reading challenges, and of course also work with Elizabeth one-on-one or in small group wherever possible. So the objective of the lesson would be to decode and organize consonant digraphs such as SH, CH, TH, KN, PH, and GN to enable my students to pronounce the words that contain such digraphs, and also then use these words in sentences to convey the proper meaning. The key vocabulary for this lesson would be inference, digraphs, setting. As comes to the materials, I would use several things. I really prefer to use a lot of charts that demonstrate different pictures, and also the digraphs themselves. I would use the charts that have words with digraphs inside these words, and a good inference book, which we'll look at later. I would start the lesson by simply introducing what we're going to do during the lesson, and explain to my students what is digraph, which is basically the two letters that make one sound. I would then ask my students to pronounce certain words. First, we would start with the group of words that have a digraph, TH, and I would ask my student to pronounce after me words like think, they, this. I would then also observe how my students doing it, if they are pronouncing and using their face and their lips and their tongue correctly when they're pronouncing these sounds. And I would then correct those students who are not properly doing it, and we would repeat the exercise again. We would then do the same thing with the words church, children, cheese, And again, I would ask my students to tell me what do they think they have to do with their lips, with their tongue, in order to pronounce these words. And I would expect them to tell me that they have to push forward their lips in order to pronounce sound church or similar sounds. We would repeat this with the words she, shop, share, and we would again review how we're pronouncing these words, what we have to do with our tongue and teeth and lips in order for these sounds to come out correctly. The next exercise that we would do would be guided practice, where we would look at different charts with the words. Each of these little charts would be, enlarged in size, so all the students in class can clearly see different groups of words. And I would ask my students to identify whether these charts have digraphs, where these words have digraphs inside of them. I would ask my students to locate the digraphs, whether they're in the beginning of this word, in the middle, at the end, and we would read them together. First I would read them myself, then the students will repeat after me, and again, we would just review that each group has a different digraph, and that specific digraph is producing a different sound. After the guided practice, I would ask my student to do an independent practice, which means that I would present them with the text that would contain both words with digraphs, but also some new words that I would expect my students or some of my students not know. This exercise would help me to build a bridge between the two parts of my lesson, from pronouncing the digraphs to the comprehension, to improving comprehension skills. So what I would ask my students to do with that paragraph that they are presented with is to underline all the words that they think contain digraphs, and circle those words that are new to them, that they don't know what they mean. After they are done with the exercise, which I would expect them, I will give them full 15 minutes to do it, we would review again the words with digraphs. I would ask them why, where do they see digraphs in those words. I would ask them to pronounce them correctly and what sounds those digraphs make. And then we would also review the new words, and I would just see if any other students in the class understand what those new words mean, and I would ask them for as many descriptions as possible to describe those new vocabulary words. The next portion of my lesson would be to actually introduce the students with the Great Inference book, which I have right here. It's Two Bad Ants. And the book is about ants traveling, ants journey. It's a great book in a sense that author is trying to imply that the journey that ants are thinking they're making is not really anywhere in the forest, but it's in the kitchen, but it's not stated directly to the reader. So the reader has to use clues to infer and understand that where ants are, and the adventures that they're going through are actually adventures that are happening in the kitchen. So, for example, to reach the delicious crystals, the ants traverse what to them in a mysterious land full of menacing obstacles, which is the kitchen. So I would ask my students to a series of questions, and as I read some text from the story, some excerpts from the story, I would ask them to pay attention and describe what they think the setting is. I would explain to them that instead of telling us where the ants are, the author is trying to give us clues and trying to tell us where the ants are. We basically have to figure it out on our own. The questions that would be appropriate to ask is, what is this lake? Is it actually a lake? What is the cave that the author talks about? Is it an actual cave? The author says the lake has steep sides. Does this provide us with any clues? We know that the lake tilted. Did someone move it? I would also tell students what is clues. I would try to explain to them that clues actually can help us to make an inference. And at this point, if students still don't recognize that we're talking about ants getting into a cup of coffee, I would actually show them a picture of ants in the cup of coffee. And then for those students who weren't able to make the connection before, I think it would really make sense to them how all prior clues made inference to ants being in a cup of coffee. We would then read another paragraph from the book, and then when students already know that we're talking about the kitchen, they would be able to actually describe what exactly author is trying to say. For example, instead of saying that ants were in the toaster, the author writes, when the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. It seemed to them that every second temperature was rising. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought they would soon be cooked. Based on the previous exercise that was done together with me, students should try to figure out on their own that we're talking about the toaster oven. After this part of the lesson is done, I really would need to understand how much students understood, how much they learned during the lesson, and of course this is where my assessments would begin. There are 3 types of assessments that I would do. The first one is observational assessment, and I would basically present the student, and of course Elizabeth too, with sheets where they're called diagnostic checklists for word recognition skills. What I would do, I would create something similar to this sheet where I would list different digraphs, and I would ask Elizabeth and other struggling readers to read these words, first to read digraphs and then read words with digraphs, in order to understand how they understood the material explained in the class. And I would definitely keep track of the responses and see if there has been any improvement from the previous time we did that to now, and how the number of the incorrect responses or correct responses has changed. The second type of assessment would be the TILES test. TILES test is very comprehensive, and it will show how Elizabeth understands how to decode digraphs. I would first lay out tiles with the individual letters, and I would ask her to point and pronounce those letters. Then I would layer out the exercise, but by adding tiles with the digraphs, and ask her to read those digraphs to pronounce sounds that she believes those digraphs make. And then I would add another layer to this exercise by introducing words that contain digraphs. Again, the results from this test will help me to identify the level of understanding that Elizabeth has now about digraphs, and whether there are still problem areas left, and what maybe she would do better recognizing some digraphs and worse recognizing some others. So it would give me a good understanding of what we still need to work on. And finally, for the inference skills, for the comprehension skills, I would use the summative assessment, which would give me an idea how well Elizabeth understood the book that we read, the passages from the book that we tried to analyze. And for that, I will actually use the chart from the teacher's guide that exists for this book, The Two Bad Ants. And this teacher guide has a really nice chart that looks like this. It basically takes parts of the sentences from the book, and then it asks students to interpret what these parts mean. For example, if it says here, a beautiful sparkling crystal, the expectation is that the student will say it's sugar, or they marched into the woods that surrounded the underground home. So the student will have to say here what do they believe author means by these inferences. That will give me a good understanding how Elizabeth understood the text, and whether there is the next exercise should be more complicated or maybe stay on the same level in order to keep working on her reading issue. And that's really the end of that lesson. However, I just wanted to say that